All right, and we are back here on BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Drive Safe Dave here, along with Dr. Curtis Walker. How you doing today, sir?
Doing wonderful. Good to be back with you. How's it going?
Man, it's going great. Are you ready for Christmas? First of all, I just want to know, did you get your big creatures outside blown up and you get your lights on? Did you get all that done, get ready for Christmas?
You know, I'm a little behind the curve with decoration. I'm ahead of the game with shopping though this year. So it's a trade-off. You can't have one, you can't have both. It's one or the other, right?
Yeah, I tried to say that to my wife, and that did not go. The boss at the house did not. No, there's no excuses. I don't get to throw down excuses. At some point or another, she just points, and I know that I'm not coming back in until it's done. Right? I mean, it's just. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how your household works, but it's kind of the way it works at mine.
Get her done. Get her done.
Get her done. Hey, so let's talk about Christmas for a minute. And I know I'm jumping around here a little bit. We'll talk about Christmas. Let's talk about Christmas. What are you going to tell me? Is Texas going to have a white Christmas this Christmas?
To be determined, but what I can say is, you know, back in April, I booked plane tickets. I was chatting with you before the show, and so my wife and daughters, we're going to make the trip from Colorado. We'll road trip to Nebraska, and then we're going to fly to New York.
Right.
And so back when I booked that ticket in April, I'm going to guarantee you when there'll be a snowstorm, right? And sure enough, as I'm looking, and there's a lot of chatter on social media about this, you know, as the weather pattern looks, unclear yet where any one storm will be. It's still too far out. But in general, there's a lot of increasing confidence that the pattern's going to favor cold and stormy across a good chunk of the country. We've got a lot of low pressure systems and waves in the atmosphere that are coming into the Pacific Northwest, and those are likely to come across the country. And where you get some additional storm system development in the kind of lee of the Rockies, those Colorado lows, and of course the East Coast lows that bring the big blizzards to places like New York City, right where I'm headed. There's increasing concern, I'll say, that I have for my own travel plans, much less anyone else. But, you know, truth be told, you know, we're entering the winter season, so someone somewhere is going to get some snow. And that's the most accurate forecast a meteorologist can give, right?
That's not saying somewhere. Someone somewhere is going to get snow. I like that. I will tell you. So here, so you've been doing this a long time, and you're actually very good at it. What is truly the best length of time when we can get a pretty good, accurate reading of what's going to transpire in any given place? Like, let's just say they're in Boulder, right? I mean, how far out really can you get it with a pretty certain degree of accuracy? Is it 24 hours? Is it 72 hours? I'm just curious, Curtis, because at some point that probability factor just drops off like a cliff, right? On how accurate you're going to be. Where is that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it really comes down into the question of, you know, what is our forecast range and lead time? And there is that whole spectrum of, it depends what you're trying to forecast. If you're a week out and I'm trying to tell you how much snow are you going to get, forget it. You're not going to have that kind of lead time. But if you're a week out, 7 to 10 days, and you're trying to get a sense of, will the pattern be changing from hot to cold to hot, you know, at dry to more active and precipitation, et cetera, well, then you have more lead time for those larger scale type of changes. And so in meteorology, that's what we call kind of the synoptic scale, that 7 to 10 day, where the general areas of high pressure, good weather, and low pressure, stormy weather are going to be. Now, specific though to that question of how much snow are you going to get from a storm on any one day, you know, that puts us more in what we call the mesoscale, or kind of mid-range in the atmospheric sciences. And that's kind of your 24 to 72 hours. And obviously, the closer you are to the event, the more confidence you have. But there's tremendous variability in the number of drivers for what that forecast confidence and accuracy is. So you mentioned Boulder, Colorado. Well, the challenge we have here is topography and terrain. So those mountains that are just west of Boulder and just west of Denver, if the wind direction changes ever so slightly, that can be the difference between 5 inches of snow and 10 inches of snow. And we may not really know that until, quite frankly, sometimes until it happens, or definitely a lot less lead time than folks like to have. And so already this season, we've seen it where we've had a couple of snowstorms that definitely overachieved and hit the high end of those snow totals. I mean, we've had other storms that have been right in range, and so that's why one of the number one frustrations I know folks have out there with meteorologists, oh, paid to get it wrong, or why do you give me a range of precipitation when it comes to snowfall? And the reality is that's kind of just the nature of the beast, so to speak, in terms of that predictability is we have to give a range because there's confidence associated with that. And I really love that the National Weather Service has been posting graphics out there now to try to educate the public and really help them understand that we can't say you're going to get 5 inches exactly, but we can be pretty confident 70, 80, 90% that you'll get in that range of 3 to 6 inches. And if you end up with 2 inches, consider yourself lucky. And if you end up with 10 inches, well, consider yourself lucky just the same, right? But it is difficult at times, and winter weather especially tends to be a lot harder to predict than say other times a year, just because of the inherent variability of the atmosphere.
And as we talk about that, and you were talking about graphics, when we look at and when we hear weather reports about, let's say, hurricanes, and they chart like paths or something, and they've got models, right? And then all of a sudden there's like 23 different wiggly lines on the direction it goes. What are the major differences between those models?
Yeah, so we kind of say in the context of tropical weather and tropical cyclone forecasting, we like to say the cone of uncertainty, right? And that's what the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center use to show what is the best guess for the middle of that storm. But it's important to remember the eye of the storm might be where the worst of the weather is, but that's not the only place that the weather happens. And so we do have to remember that storms come in all shapes and sizes. And so some of them can be very large tropical cyclones and hurricanes that have impacts hundreds of miles out from the center, and others might be a lot more condensed and localized. Now, in terms of the variability of models out there, we have different models that are tuned for different types of weather conditions. And so we kind of have our general state-of-the-art average models. There are a special suite of models that are, say, convection allowing. And so we might want to look at those models more in, say, summertime to know where might we have severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, for example. Other models are much more tuned to, say, hurricanes and tropical cyclones, where they work better in the tropics. But if you try to predict once a storm has, say, crossed 20 degrees north latitude, just hypothetically there, maybe that model doesn't quite work as well. And then we also have different models across agencies. And so, our weather forecast services here in the United States have suites of models that they use. And my organization, NCAR, has models that they put out and run. The folks over in the United Kingdom, they have their own kind of suite of models that are run. And around the world, all of the meteorological agencies of many different nations out there have their own models that, again, are kind of fine-tuned, but also developed with a fair amount of both similarities and differences in how they perform overall.
When you over there at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, what is the main mission over there? I know y'all all do a varied number of things over there because it's like a big think tank going on over there. But what's the true purpose of what goes on over there at the National Center for Atmospheric Research? What's y'all's fundamental goal?
Yeah, to put it succinctly, our mission is to understand and model the behavior of the atmosphere and related Earth system science. And so, in my specific role, that takes the form of understanding how do weather and climate impact surface transportation from roads to rails to maritime. For other folks out there, that's building these state of the art models so that we can predict things like where's a flood going to happen or where's a hurricane going to make its landfall. And then there are groups that do all kinds of exciting work, such as when's the sun going to hiccup and throw a solar flare that might disrupt our communication and navigation infrastructure or bring down all the satellites around the planet, or forecasting what's the climate going to be like 100 years in the future. And so it really is exciting. I like the way you put it, kind of a think tank, because we really do all kinds of exciting work. But at its core, it's to understand how the Earth is going to affect society and people, and how society and people in turn affect the Earth as well.
And as you talk about surfaces and what you do specifically dealing with transportation, it it does truly vary greatly by the seasons, right? I mean, it varies greatly, not only the impact that it takes on how the vehicle runs on the surface, but also the condition of the surface, how it is weathered, right? How well it holds up, how well our infrastructure is being designed to create longevity, right? Because you can make a really sticky surface, but it may not last a really long time, right? There's a trade-off there, right, Curtis?
Yeah, huge trade-offs. And in terms of things like seasonality, so we're entering the cold season now. And there are huge implications for the trucking community when it comes to like seasonal load restrictions and, kind of ice. Think of that ice road truckers kind of scenario, if you will, where there are roads, especially kind of northern tier of the United States, up in Canada, and northern climates around the world, where when you have that permafrost that develops in the wintertime and the soil is more or less frozen solid, you can run heavier loads in those communities, and that could be huge differences in travel time, or accessibility for communities that might not be reachable by roads, say in the summertime or in the wet or mud season, when those roads aren't available. Now, the other regarding that question of infrastructure, well, the question is, if we look at changing climate and weather patterns over the long haul, what is that doing to those to that permafrost? Is it melting, or is it not perhaps occurring as early in the season as it used to? And it might be shrinking that road for those kind of rural and low volume and minimum maintenance roads, that they can be used to haul goods in and out of communities. And so, that's some of the work that we're doing, is looking at how weather and climate are impacting that infrastructure, both from the built environment, and hey, is this bridge that's built on the East Coast going to withstand sea level rise, or is it going to withstand the next major hurricane that comes and makes landfall in a community? To the question of can that community in Alaska rely on road transportation to reach them in the wintertime, or do they have to make bigger investments in say aviation and having relying solely on aircraft, for example?
Yeah, I'm just like a lot of the times, and you talk about travel and services, that there are many, and I know ice road truckers, but there are many places in not only this country but around the world that rely on lakes to freeze over and rely on bodies of water to come so solid that you can travel over them for great lengths, to not only for commerce but for trade. Do you guys play a part in identifying when those types of scenarios will be best, or are those more regional?
I'm a bit of both, really, at the end of the day. And so, I'll say it's active partnerships in those regions and communities where I won't say we have all of the expertise, in house, but it's those partnerships with communities to where we kind of take our best tools and foot forward and say, here's the capabilities that our models can do, and then apply that to the local and community and regional level problems and challenges. And I'm really a huge advocate and proponent of co-creating new knowledge. It's not enough to, take the knowledge we have, throw it over the fence and say, hey, here's a tool and system, use it in good health and be well. But rather really meeting these people and communities where they're at to truly understand their problems and together come up with that integrated solution for the betterment of the community, of commerce, of travel, and ultimately of safety as well, right?
Absolutely. And as you talk about that, how well are we as a populace becoming more educated with the technologies associated with weather forecasting? Because I think as collectively, I think we all are a little bit better than we were back just reading the weather almanac, right? The farmer's almanac. I think we all are getting a little bit better at understanding the technology because we use apps every day, and there are tons of apps that help us associate weather forecasting. Speak to the technology and us better understanding it.
Well, I was just talking to one of my colleagues the other day on that very point, and we were talking about how when he was going, through his own academic program and an early career in his own role, there were times, you woke up and you were surprised to see snow on the ground in the morning, and the forecast was wrong. We didn't have the same level of technology and satellites and weather models and observations to keep tabs on what's happening out there in the world. But that challenge has shifted now because everyone, or I'll say many people, have a computer in their pocket. You have your smartphone, your tablet, your smartwatches, what have you. But the challenge is changing because now there's information saturation. There's so much information out there and consumable media and other information that it is a bit of the challenge of what are the best sources and which ones are the most accurate. Of course, the most accurate is the one you use on your phone, right? But in all seriousness, the challenge now that faces the weather enterprise is how do we make sure that there's consistency in the messages that we're trying to convey, and that if a significant weather event like a tornado or hurricane is bearing down on a community, it's not so much how many inches of snow you're going to get that's important, but the consistent message of, stay off the roads, avoid travel if possible, stay safe. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's 2 inches or 10 inches, the roads are going to be icy slick, and we don't want anyone, ending up in the ditch or finding themselves in any kind of bad way. And so it's processing through that information and having consistency in the message of communicating whatever that weather hazard might be. That's kind of the new frontier and the new battle that we're having across the weather enterprise.
Yeah, I like that because there is so much data out there, and there's so many people putting information out there. Heck, we even have a network or a cable network and an industry associated with just reporting basically weather and everything in that, and it has become a commerce type deal that we wouldn't have had years ago. Most of the time we just relied on our weather guys. How important is it that we get the right data? Because I know that I mean we have weather apps, we have different kinds of apps that we listen to, but we also have this thing called media and word out, and a lot of times we get a lot of misinformation, don't we?
Yeah, and so it goes back to that comment of, that consistency in the messaging and making sure that all core partners are on board. And so, that really begins with, the National Weather Service as kind of the, government sector side or public sector side, but then working closely with partners in the private sector and then partners that are in the media to, really try to convey that consistent and unified message. Because otherwise you don't want a case where someone says, well, my app said this, or my favorite, meteorologist on XYZ radio or, ABC channel, whatever, said something different. And then when those messages are at odds, that reflects, I'll say ultimately poorly on the profession as a whole, because then it's that question of where it's the game of telephone. Where along the way did we lose that message? And then, as you said, with the rise of social media, how do we combat I'll say kind of the hype part of the community, which is all about getting clicks on their YouTube channel, on their social media, what have you, and they may not be conveying the best information. Now, I won't say it's deliberately wrong or misinformation, but as I kind of alluded at the beginning, talking about models, we can't show one weather model and say this is what's going to happen, lock it in, 6 to 10 days out, boom, there's your blizzard. But really, we have to look at what's the state of play across all of the models and how do those change over time. We really look for that consensus. And so that's where, best practices out there are. Let's look at what's happening. I said my forecast is the pattern's going to get more active. There's probably going to be a storm across the country, every 3 to 5 days. And, I can tell you with certainty now, yeah, this weekend looks like the Midwest, kind of Nebraska to the Great Lakes, probably going to be a storm somewhere in there. The early part of next week looks like Midwest to Ohio River Valley, maybe even Southeast United States, probably going to be another storm system. That one could actually have some severe thunderstorms and tornadoes with it. It's not a lock it in, and if you're in any one state, take shelter now, but it's perk your ears up, pay attention to the weather, and watch as it evolves from those trusted sources in both the media, the National Weather Service, and the private sector.
So, and I'm just going to ask right out, is this going to be a normal winter? Is this going to be a colder winter, or is this? And I know you got all these models, but realistically, I'm not looking for am I going to get snow on Christmas? But what I am looking for as the long-term look, what you see as it develops. Do you think this will be a colder winter? I mean, are we getting two extremes, hot summers and really cold winters? Is that kind of where we're at right now with where we're at with the global warming and all this other things that are affecting our climate? Or are we seeing a lot of those? Is that what we're seeing?
Well, every winter is a normal winter, right? And normal is I'm being facetious there, but normal is it's extremes, and so I do think we're going to have a changeable winter. This goes into the what we call teleconnections, and so atmospheric patterns, say in the Pacific Ocean, affect what we have here in the United States, and then what we see across the Atlantic Ocean, and then Europe and Asia beyond. And so, the whole global weather system is certainly connected. And what we've seen so far, we are in a La Nina, and so that's characterized by colder than average ocean temperatures, sea surface temperatures in the Pacific Ocean along the equator. What that usually means for winters in the United States is that we tend to see a more dominant northern jet stream, kind of that corridor of faster, stronger winds, or think of that as the storm superhighway. And so typically that means we have colder temperatures, but also we'll tend to have maybe drier snowstorms as well, so more of that powder. Then perhaps storms that are more influenced by that southern jet stream, which can tend to have a lot more moisture associated with it. But with that said, now I just mentioned, El Nino, La Nina. That's one of the many other teleconnection patterns out there that influence the weather. And so there's oscillations, as they're called, in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, and those together can mean a lot of things. So for the winter, I would say cold air outbreaks are absolutely going to be possible. We've been in a La Nina now for about the last three winter seasons. And so you remember February 2021 down in Texas. That was a La Nina year too. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility to see another one of those cold air outbreaks all the way down to the Gulf Coast. From looking at the pattern, I'll say probably going to be a little bit stormier and more active than maybe what we had last winter as well, in that the pattern is forecast to shift as we go into the spring and summer. We'll probably lose that La Nina and transition to either neutral conditions or maybe even El Nino, which is where instead of cold water in the equatorial Pacific, we start to have more kind of above average sea surface temperatures. And so that's where sometimes places like California can start to get in on a lot more rainfall, which would be very good for that drought situation in the Southwest. So I'd say a changeable winter is probably what we're going to have, and I think we are going to see those increasing extremes where winters get colder, but then you have those really mild breaks in between as well.
You know what? I'm going to tell you right now, Curtis. I don't know if scientists are made for politics because you got a way of rolling the answers into something that works. I like it a lot. Hey, Curtis, look, we got to go, man. I could sit here and talk to you all day, but I appreciate you jumping on. As always, you bring a lot of information to the show and help us to better understand what goes on out there. Before you get out of here, I always ask you, and I ask that you state your name, who you're with, and that you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Can you do that for me?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I'm Curtis Walker with the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Happy holidays.
All right. Thank you very much, Curtis. You have a great Christmas. We'll see you later.